You ever get blindsided so hard your ears ring for a week? That's how this whole mess started. One minute I was folding laundry, the next, I was getting screamed at like I'd set the house on fire. It was a Thursday night. I remember that clearly because the Titans were playing and I just sat down with a cold beer. Sarah came in from the kitchen with that look, you know the one. Eyebrows arched like she just read something about me in a gossip magazine, arms crossed like she was guarding state secrets. "You're cheating on me, aren't you?" she said. I blinked. Thought maybe she was joking. "What the hell are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Mark," she snapped. I saw the texts. Texts? I hadn't texted anyone but my buddy Jason and my manager at work. Unless Jason had suddenly started calling me baby and sending heart emojis, which, to be fair, wouldn't be the weirdest thing he's done, I knew she was bluffing. "Show me," I said. She didn't. She just stormed upstairs, mumbling about how she was going to her dad's and needed space. I sat there for a while, trying to piece together what just happened. It didn't make any damn sense. By the next morning, I had a busted lip and a cracked rib. Courtesy of my father-in-law, Ronnie. I hadn't even heard the knock when he showed up. He came in all red-faced and breathing heavy like he was fresh off a tractor. I barely got a word out before he swung. Old man still had some strength in those sun-leathered arms. "You cheating little bastard," he yelled as I stumbled back into the coffee table. "Ronnie, wait. You don't understand." But he didn't want to understand. He wanted to make sure I felt every ounce of his righteous anger. I curled up, hands over my head, thinking, this is insane. I didn't cheat on anybody. By the time he left, panting and cussing, I was bleeding from the mouth and my side felt like it had been hit with a sledgehammer. I sat there on the floor, groaning, trying to breathe. I didn't go to the hospital. Just taped myself up the best I could. I wasn't gonna give them the satisfaction of seeing me crawl to urgent care. No sir. The house felt different after that. Quieter. Angrier. Her stuff was still there, but her presence was gone. The scent of her perfume on the pillows turned sour in my nose. I couldn't sleep in our bed. I took to the couch like a dog locked out for peeing on the rug. Days passed. I called. I texted. Nothing. Jason stopped by to check on me and brought a bottle of bourbon. "You look like roadkill," he said. "I feel worse." What the hell happened? I told him everything. The accusation. The beating. The silence. He took a long drink, then leaned forward. "You sure you didn't do anything? Not even flirt?" "No. I swear on everything. I was faithful. Always have been." He nodded, slow and skeptical, but he didn't push. That's what I liked about Jason, he'd bust your chops, but when it mattered, he shut up and listened. About a week later, I saw her. Not in person, but on a friend's social media. Someone tagged her at a restaurant. She was smiling. Laughing. Sitting across from a guy I didn't recognize. Tallish, scruffy beard, round glasses. Harmless looking. Except, he had a cane leaning against his chair. My heart dropped. I zoomed in on the photo. There it was. Her hand on his. Clear as day. I stared for a long time. Not because of what it meant, but because of how ridiculous it all was. She left me. Lied about me. Let her daddy beat me to a pulp. And all the while, she was sneaking around with some guy who looked like he couldn't walk a mile without a break. Something inside me broke then, not like a bone, but like a dam. The confusion, the heartbreak, the humiliation, they all came flooding out, and what was left in its place was cold. Clear. I wasn't just gonna sit around and mope. I was gonna get even. Revenge ain't something I was raised on. My mom always said, bitterness is a poison you drink hoping the other person dies. She wasn't wrong. But I'll tell you what, after everything Sarah pulled, I was ready to take a long, slow sip. I didn't lash out right away. I waited. Sat with it. Let it settle into my bones like old anger does. Every bruise on my ribs was a reminder. Every time I passed our wedding photo in the hallway, her in white, me in a cheap rental tux, I felt it boil a little hotter. I wasn't gonna do anything stupid. No yelling. No fighting. No dramatic Facebook rants like a teenager. I wanted something quiet. Clean. Something that'd eat at her long after I walked away with a smile. So first, I got curious. About him. His name was Dennis. Dennis Lake. I found his full name thanks to a tag on a mutual friend's post, and from there, the internet gave me all I needed. Social media, LinkedIn, a few blog posts about healing crystals and urban wellness. Turned out Dennis ran a little shop downtown. One of those places with incense in the air and a jar for good vibes donations by the register. He wasn't exactly the devil. Hell, he looked like the kind of guy who wouldn't hurt a fly. Lame in more ways than one. But he was the guy Sarah cheated with. So that made him my enemy. I paid his shop a visit. The first time I walked in, he didn't even look up from his little table of trinkets. "Hey, man," he said, soft as a sigh. "Welcome to the healing loop." The place smelled like lavender and something vaguely sour. Tapestries hung from the ceiling like ghosts, and weird flute music trickled from a speaker in the corner. "You Dennis?" I asked. He nodded. "That's me." "Cool shop," I lied, glancing around. "What's your thing here? Energy? Stones?" He smiled, like I'd just passed a test. "All of it. Energy alignment. Herbal remedies. Spiritual redirection." Sounded like snake oil wrapped in incense paper, but I played along. Bought a stupid little amethyst stone for $15 and asked him about private healing sessions. "Oh yeah," he said, eyes twinkling. "Totally. I offer one-on-ones. Energy realignment, intention cleansing, you name it." "Sweet," I said. "I'm going through something. Might be cool to talk about it." He wrote his number on a business card with a peace sign stamped on it and handed it to me like it was sacred. "You can text me anytime." I smiled, nodded, walked out, and tossed the stone into the street. I didn't contact him right away. I waited a few days, all while keeping tabs on Sarah. She hadn't come home. Still staying with her dad, Ronnie, the same man who'd turned my ribs into jelly. I saw her car parked out front almost every night when I drove by. Sometimes, Dennis's car was there too. That part didn't sting as much anymore. Honestly, seeing them together just made me more focused. She had accused me. Lied about texts. Manipulated her father into hurting me. All to cover up her affair. And now I had Dennis's trust. Or at least enough of it to get started. I texted him on a Wednesday afternoon. "Hey Dennis, it's Mark. Can we talk soon? Feel like I've got some heavy stuff on my chest. Need that energy thing." He replied 5 minutes later. "Hey brother. Absolutely. Come by tomorrow at 3. I'll clear the space." I smiled. Phase 1, get close. When I showed up, he greeted me like we'd been friends since college. The place was empty, save for the constant flute music and a fresh bowl of sage burning in the corner. He motioned to a low cushion on the floor. "Sit, brother." I sat, and we started talking. Well, he did most of the talking. He asked about my energy. My past. My wounds of the spirit. I made up stuff as I went, told him my wife left, said I felt used, abandoned, lost in the world. He nodded like a therapist. Closed his eyes like he could see my soul. It was easy. Too easy. By the end of the hour, he patted my shoulder and said, "You're on a journey now. And you're gonna find peace." "Thanks, Dennis," I said, shaking his hand. "You're a good man." He smiled. "Just trying to help." Over the next couple weeks, I kept going. Told Sarah I'd moved on and stopped texting her. She still hadn't reached out to apologize or explain, so I didn't see the point. I wasn't after her love anymore. I was after something else. Dennis and I talked about life. I learned about his past. His limp was from a car accident 10 years ago. Hit by a drunk driver. Broke his pelvis and messed up his leg bad enough that he'd never walk normal again. People underestimated him, he said. Always had. Well, he wasn't wrong. I let him trust me. I let him believe I was his broken little project. All the while, I was planning. One night, after a long session, he invited me to grab dinner with him and Sarah. Said they were keeping things casual, but they wanted to include me, said I had good energy and they both liked having me around. Can you believe that? The guy who stole my wife. And my wife who lied to the world about me. And me, sitting between them like a damn fool. I said yes. But not because I wanted their company. Because I was ready to set the trap. I showed up 10 minutes early. They were already at the restaurant, sitting in a booth near the back like high school kids trying to avoid the chaperones. Sarah saw me first. She waved and gave me that half smile I hadn't seen in weeks. Not since the night she accused me of cheating and ran off like I was the villain in some soap opera. "Mark," she said, standing like we were old friends bumping into each other at the grocery store. "Glad you came." I nodded and forced a smile. Wouldn't miss it. Dennis got up slower, favoring that bad leg. He extended his hand like we hadn't had 10 awkward, incense-filled chats already. "Brother," he said, smiling. "It's good to have you here." I shook his hand and slid into the booth across from them. They looked like a mismatched couple from a low-budget indie flick. She was all dolled up in a black blouse that showed more shoulder than usual. He wore a loose linen shirt with a wooden bead necklace that screamed, "I own a wind chime and talk to the moon." I took a sip of the water the waitress brought and glanced between them. "So, how long have you two been a thing?" Sarah cleared her throat. Dennis chuckled. "Well," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear, "it kinda just happened. After everything with us," she looked at me carefully, "I needed time to think." "About who you really wanted," I said. Dennis laughed like it was a joke. Sarah didn't. I leaned back. "Don't worry, I'm not mad. Just curious." They exchanged a quick look. Sarah said, "It wasn't personal, Mark." "No," I said, folding my hands. "It was just marriage." That shut her up for a moment. Dinner went on like a weird dream. Dennis kept asking philosophical questions. "What does forgiveness mean to you?" or "Do you believe pain is sacred?" And Sarah kept giving him eyes like he was reciting poetry. I answered every question with the same kind of fake depth he seemed to respect. "Forgiveness is about power," I said. "You don't forgive to let someone off the hook. You forgive to show them you're above needing revenge." Dennis loved that. Nodded so hard I thought his head might fall off. Sarah looked like she wasn't sure if I was being genuine or just smarter than she remembered. Both, probably. After dinner, I offered to pay. "Mark, that's not necessary," Sarah said, touching my arm. "Really?" "No, I insist," I said, smiling. "Call it closure." And while they sat there beaming at my generosity, I slipped the little flash drive from my pocket and planted it under Dennis's seat. Took 2 seconds. No one noticed. The next morning, I drove back to his shop. "Hey man," Dennis said, opening the door and waving me in. "You feeling lighter after that dinner?" "Lighter and wiser," I said, smiling. "Thought I'd swing by and grab some of that incense you recommended." He walked toward the back and disappeared behind a curtain. That gave me just enough time to reach under the cushion of his little prayer bench and retrieve the flash drive I'd left the night before. I slid it back into my coat pocket. "Lavender," he called out. "Sure," I said. "Let's go with that." He came back, handed me a pack of hand-wrapped sticks, and I handed him a 10. "You're good for the soul, Dennis," I said as I left. "Keep the change." Back home, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. I'd hidden a tiny mic in the casing. Cheap little thing from a spy store online. Sounded like a gimmick, but it worked better than I expected. I clicked through the audio. Most of it was static and creaky chairs. But around an hour after I left the restaurant, I heard it. Her voice. "Do you think he suspects anything?" Dennis's voice followed, soft and slow. "Doesn't matter. Let him play the enlightened ex. He'll never understand what this is. I still can't believe he bought it." "That you were just trying to help me spiritually," she said with a laugh. "He's broken, Sarah. Easy to guide. Easy to manipulate." "God," she said. "I should have left him years ago." Then there was a pause. Some rustling. Maybe a kiss. Then Dennis again, his voice a little more smug. "Let him keep coming around. It's good for business." I stared at the screen for a long time. That was it. That was the nail. She had played me. Twice. Lied about the affair. Let her father beat me. And now she and Dennis were getting off on pretending they were saviors while I was the broken idiot who needed healing. I copied the audio file, edited out the static, and trimmed it to the juiciest lines. Then I sent it to Ronnie. No explanation. Just the file. 2 hours later, my phone rang. "Ronnie." I answered. "Hey." He didn't even say hello. "You tellin' me my daughter's been lyin' to me this whole damn time?" "Yup." "That Dennis fella, he the one she cheated with?" "Yup." I could hear him breathing heavy on the other end, just like the day he showed up and turned my ribs to jelly. Only this time, he wasn't mad at me. "I'm sorry, Mark," he said after a long silence. "I really am." "Thanks, Ronnie." Then he said something I didn't expect. "I'm gonna make this right." I didn't know what Ronnie meant when he said, "I'm gonna make this right," but something in his voice told me to stay out of his way. This was a man who'd beaten me half to death based on a lie, and now he knew the truth. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just said those 5 words in a low, steady growl like he was reading from a vow. That kind of calm. That scared me more than the fists. A few days passed. No word from Sarah. No word from Dennis. Nothing from Ronnie either. I stayed patient. The old me might have poked the fire just to watch it burn. But not now. Now I knew the best revenge wasn't loud, it was slow. Cold. Precise. A lesson they'd feel every time they thought they were safe again. I figured Ronnie would do what Ronnie does, whatever that looked like. But in the meantime, I had one more card to play. See, Dennis didn't just run a shady incense shop. He had an online store too, selling ethically sourced stones and oils and moon-charged crap to gullible folks across the country. And you know what makes running a spiritual business hard? Bad press. Especially when it's real. I made a fake email account and sent that audio recording to a few popular, healing forums Dennis was a part of. I added a message like, "Hey, I used to go to the healing loop for emotional support until I found out what the owner really thinks of his clients behind their backs. Thought the community should know. Attached was the audio file with Sarah laughing about manipulating me and Dennis calling me easy to guide. I didn't even have to sign it. By that night, there were dozens of comments under his business page. Unbelievable betrayal. Can't believe I trusted this guy with my energy work. So much for authenticity. Shame. One person even posted screenshots of a refund request. Another posted a meme. Dennis's face superimposed on a rat with sage in its paws. The next morning, I parked a block down from his shop and watched. Around noon, Sarah showed up. Stormed inside like a woman on fire. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the body language. She was pointing. Yelling. He was trying to calm her down, hands out like a magician trying to do damage control. They argued for a full 10 minutes before she slammed the door and peeled out of the lot. A few customers walked in, then walked right back out. One even ripped a flyer off the window. Dennis came out front about an hour later and yanked down the sign that said, "Find your light within." Too late, buddy. The darkness already found you. I went home and cracked a beer, feeling something close to peace for the first time in weeks. And then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ronnie. I had a chat with Dennis. He won't be bothering you again. I stared at the message for a while. Now, Ronnie wasn't the kind of guy to use fancy words. Chat could have meant anything. A warning. A beating. Something worse. I didn't ask. Whatever he did, it worked. Because that night, Dennis posted an Instagram story saying the healing loop was closing indefinitely for spiritual renovation. Then he deleted his entire page. 2 days later, I got a knock at the door. It was Sarah. Hair in a messy bun. No makeup. Hoodie and jeans instead of her usual try-hard outfits. She looked tired. And smaller somehow. Like the lies had finally started weighing her down. "Hey," she said quietly. "Hey." She stared at me for a few seconds. "Can we talk?" I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "Say what you gotta say." She looked at the ground. I didn't know he was recording. I didn't think you'd find out. "Yeah," I said. "That's kinda the problem, huh? You didn't think." She sniffled and nodded. "I didn't come here to fight. Or to ask for anything. I'm sorry, Mark. Really." I crossed my arms. "You accused me of cheating. Lied to your dad. Watched him beat the hell out of me. Then you ran off with the guy who sold rocks and called it healing." "I know," she whispered. "I know I ruined everything." I waited. Let the silence do the work. Then she said something almost too soft to hear. "Can you ever forgive me?" Forgive her? That was the thing. I already had. But not for her sake. For mine. I needed to let go of the hate to think clearly. And that's what let me make my moves. That's what let me take back power, inch by inch. I looked her dead in the eye. "I don't hate you, Sarah. I just don't respect you anymore. And there's no coming back from that." She nodded slowly, blinking away tears. "I deserve that." "Yeah," I said. "You do." She turned and walked down the steps, hands in her pockets, head bowed like a kid who just got grounded. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel sad either. I felt done. It's strange how fast life settles when you finally let go of the rope you've been burning your hands on. The rope of trying to fix someone who doesn't want fixing. The rope of clinging to a version of love that only ever existed in your own head. Sarah didn't come around again after that last talk. No late-night texts. No calls. No social media hints that she wanted me back. And that silence? That was the best parting gift she ever gave me. I heard through the grapevine that Dennis skipped town. One of the shop regulars said he left behind a busted van full of cracked crystals and expired kombucha in the back alley behind his store. I pictured him limping toward a bus station with a duffel bag of healing stones, and no clue where to go next. Good riddance. As for Ronnie, he kept his word. I don't know exactly what happened between him and his daughter after the truth came out, but I did get a letter from him about a week later. A real one. Handwritten. Mark. I made a hell of a mistake, and I'll carry that with me. Ain't nothing I can say to take back what I did to you. But I want you to know you were right to be angry. You handled it better than I would've, and I respect that. If you ever need anything, you call me. I mean that. Ronnie. There was a check inside for $2,000. Scrawled in the memo line, for the broken ribs. I didn't cash it. Still got it taped to the inside of a drawer in my desk. I figured holding onto it was worth more than the money. A month went by. Then two. I fixed the front porch that had been sagging since last fall. Put new tires on the truck. Even started going to this old coffee shop downtown just to read the paper and drink something that didn't come from a gas station. People nodded. Some even talked. It felt good to be seen again, not as Sarah's husband or the poor guy who got beaten up by his father-in-law, but as me. Just Mark. A guy who'd taken a hit and got back up. I got a dog too. A rescue mutt named Tank. Half pit bull, half question mark. Loyal as hell and dumb as a brick, but he'd sit next to me every night like we'd been through the same kind of war. Maybe we had. One day, I ran into Lisa. She used to work with Sarah at the old bank before Sarah quit to focus on healing work. We bumped into each other at the farmer's market, of all places. I was picking out tomatoes. She was standing next to the honey stand, sipping lemonade. Mark, she asked, surprised. Is that you? I nodded. Hey, Lisa. You look good, she said, tilting her head. Like, better. I chuckled. Divorce will do that to you. She laughed, and we talked for a few minutes. It was easy, natural. No pity in her eyes. No digging for gossip. Before I left, she touched my arm. I always thought you were too good for her, you know. I shrugged. Took me a while to see it. Well, she said, smiling. Glad you finally did. That night, I sat on my back porch with a cold beer, watching the sky turn orange over the trees. Tank was snoring at my feet. Crickets chirped like they were finally back on duty. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what had been taken from me. I was thinking about what I still had. My breath. My peace. Myself. That revenge? That was done. Sarah lost me. Dennis lost everything. Ronnie had to live with the guilt. But me? I won. Not by hurting anyone. Just by surviving, and walking away with my dignity intact. And maybe that's the best kind of revenge there is. The leaves were just starting to turn. That burnt orange and fading green that made the neighborhood look like an old postcard. Tank and I were doing our usual walk after dinner, circling the block slow, like old men with nowhere to be. I'd started settling into my new normal. That quiet kind of life I used to think was boring, but now? It felt earned. I thought the past was finally behind me. But the past doesn't knock. It lets itself in when you're comfortable. It was a Thursday. Cool breeze, golden light. I was flipping steaks on the grill when I heard a car pull into the drive. Didn't think much of it at first, until I saw her. Sarah. She stepped out of an old Toyota Corolla. Not hers. Probably borrowed. She was thinner. Hair darker now, like she'd dyed it, but her face looked heavier somehow, weighed down with whatever the months had done to her. I put the tongs down. "Hey," she said, half smiling like it was still a possibility. "Can't say I was expecting company," I replied. "I know," she said. "I won't stay long. I've been driving around all day. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't invite her in. I didn't offer a chair." Tank trotted over, gave her a quick sniff, and sat down beside me. Even he knew better now. She stayed by the gate. Hands tucked in her coat. Eyes flicking between me and the dog like she didn't know which one of us to try first. "I've been trying to get clean," she said. "From everything. The lies. The people. The habits." I nodded once. Said nothing. "I lost my apartment. Couldn't keep up with rent. Got laid off from the yoga studio. Nobody wants to hire someone with my kind of story." Her voice broke a little on the word story. I watched her wipe at her face quick, like tears weren't allowed unless they caught her by surprise. "I know you probably don't care," she added. "And I wouldn't blame you." I leaned back against the porch post. "You're right. I don't care. Not like I used to." She blinked. That stung her more than any insult would have. Because it was the truth. Real indifference? That's worse than hate. At least hate means someone still holds space for you. "I didn't come to win you back," she said after a beat. "I came because you're the only person who ever really knew me. The only one who ever wanted to." I looked down at Tank, who tilted his head like he was waiting for my next move. "Sarah," I said, finally. "I wanted the version of you that didn't exist. You let me build a picture in my head and called it love. But love's not real if it's built on pretending." She exhaled. "I know. And now?" I said. "I've learned how to love someone else." She looked up, startled. "Who?" I pointed down at Tank. "Me." She laughed. Just once. Not a happy sound. More like something painful escaped by mistake. "I guess I had to lose everything to see what I was," she said. "I guess you did. I'm not asking for a place to stay," she added quickly. I needed someone to see me." I thought about that for a second. Then nodded once, sharp. "I see you, Sarah," I said. "But that doesn't mean I'm gonna carry you anymore." She took that like a slap, but she didn't fight it. Just nodded, turned, and walked back to the car. As she pulled out of the drive, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel sorry either. I just felt done. Tank let out a low bark, like he was asking if that chapter was finally closed. "Yeah, bud," I muttered, patting his head. "She's just a ghost now." We went back to the grill. The steaks needed flipping. The evening still had warmth in it. The world had moved on, and so had I. Life, it turns out, doesn't wrap things up like a movie. There's no slow piano music and no grand finale where everything clicks into place. It just keeps moving, like a freight train through fog. You either learn to ride it or get left behind coughing on the dust. After Sarah's visit, things got quieter. Not in a haunting way, more like the quiet that comes when a storm finally passes and you realize how nice it is to hear yourself think again. I didn't tell anyone she came by. Didn't need to. Some things are better kept between you and the sunset. Tank and I kept our rhythm. Morning walks. Coffee and toast. Fixing up little things around the house that had gone neglected during the chaos. I even started working on an old project I'd abandoned, a deck out back, the one I'd planned to build when Sarah and I first moved in. Funny how I couldn't picture her on it anymore. But I could see myself. Maybe even a new someone one day. If the time was right. One evening, I was hammering down the last plank when I heard a voice from the street. "Hey, neighbor. That deck looks solid." It was Greg, the guy who lived 2 doors down. He'd always been polite but never talkative. This time, he was holding a 6-pack and had his golden retriever in tow. "You earned a beer," he said, grinning. "Mind if I sit?" We ended up talking for an hour. Nothing deep: sports, yard tools, barbecue. It felt good. Like I was finally back among the living. Over the next few weeks, I started seeing people differently. Or maybe they started seeing me differently. No longer the guy who got cheated on. Or the guy whose father-in-law beat him bloody. Now I was the guy who built a deck, walked his dog, fixed things with his own hands. The guy who kept standing, even after the world knocked him flat. I started saying yes to more things: cookouts, hardware store trips, helping an old woman across town fix her broken fence. I even went to church once. Not for God, really, but for the coffee afterward and the conversations. It wasn't about filling a void. It was about realizing there was no void anymore. One Friday night, I had Greg and a few others over for drinks on the new deck. Nothing fancy, just cold beers, a portable speaker, and the smell of grilled burgers in the air. We raised our bottles for a toast, and Greg asked, "What are we cheersing to?" I looked around. At the fresh wood beneath our feet, the sound of Tank snoring under the table, the clean air of a life that no longer carried the stink of lies. "To second chances," I said. They nodded. And after a beat, I added, "and to finally burning the right bridges." It wasn't meant to be profound, but something in the silence that followed told me it hit home with more than just me. Maybe we all had a bridge we needed to let burn. I hadn't told them everything. They didn't know the details of what Sarah did, or how Dennis limped his sorry self out of town. They didn't know about the check Ronnie wrote or the night Sarah stood at my gate with nothing left but regret. But I didn't need them to know. All that mattered now was what I'd built from the wreckage. Later that night, after everyone left, I sat out on the deck alone. The stars were out. Tank laid his head on my boot. I raised one last drink to the sky and whispered, "Here's to the man I used to be, and the one I'm still becoming." No music played. No lights flickered. But something in me shifted, permanent and quiet. The kind of peace that doesn't need an audience. Just a man, a dog, and the knowledge that some stories don't end, they evolve. I used to think the past only had power if you fed it. Like some stray dog you could either shoo away or toss scraps to. But I was wrong. The past isn't a dog, it's more like smoke. Even if you air out the room, it finds ways to linger. Clings to the curtains. Sinks into the walls. And sometimes, it comes back through the front door when you're least expecting it. It started with a phone call. I was out back one morning, sanding the railing of my deck. Tank sprawled at my feet like he didn't have a care in the world. The phone buzzed on the table. I didn't recognize the number. Normally, I'd ignore it. But some whisper from my gut, told me to pick up. "Hello?" There was a pause, then a woman's voice. "Is this Daniel Miller?" "Yeah," I said, cautious. "Who's this?" "This is Officer Lynette Ward with the County Sheriff's Department. I'm calling because your name came up during an active investigation." I didn't say anything at first. I just stared out at the yard, my hand frozen on the sander. "Investigation into what?" I finally asked. "A man named Dennis Rayburn." She asked if I could come down to the station to answer a few questions. Said I wasn't in trouble. Just trying to piece together a timeline, she told me. By the time I got to the station, my shirt was sticking to my back. Not from heat. From nerves. That same cold sweat I'd felt the night Ronnie broke my ribs. They led me to a small, windowless room. Officer Ward was waiting. Late 40s. steady eyes. She didn't have that smug look a lot of badge wearers seem to carry. She looked like someone who'd seen too much and no longer had the energy to pretend otherwise. "We're investigating a string of burglaries," she said. One of the suspects was Dennis Rayburn. I blinked. Dennis? With the limp? "That'd be him," she said, flipping through a folder. "Did you know he was staying in a halfway house outside of town after being arrested in another state for fraud?" "No," I said honestly. "Well," she said, "he skipped out on probation 2 weeks ago. And last night, he was picked up trying to pawn some stolen jewelry." I crossed my arms. "What's that got to do with me?" "He gave your name. Said you threatened him. Said you ruined his life." I gave a dry laugh. "He ruined his own life the minute he crawled into bed with my wife." She smiled slightly. "We figured he might have had some bias. They didn't hold me long. Took my statement. Thanked me for my time. But as I walked back to my truck, something tightened in my chest. A thought I couldn't shake. Dennis was still out there, still limping around like a roach in the dark. And now he was pointing fingers. Still trying to twist things. Still dragging my name into his muck. I sat in the cab for a minute before starting the engine. Tank was in the back seat, tail wagging like this was just another errand. But I didn't feel calm anymore. Back home, I sat on the deck, watching the sun crawl down the sky. My peace, my hard-won silence, had a crack in it now. And I realized something. Some people aren't satisfied with ruining your past. They'll keep clawing at your present if you let them. Dennis was a shadow I hadn't fully shaken. And now? Now he'd stepped back into the light. I didn't know what his game was, or if Sarah was still tangled up in it. But I knew this, I wasn't the same man they used to mess with. And if the past wanted to crawl back into my life, I'd be ready this time. There's a moment, after the fire burns out, after the dust settles, where all that's left is the quiet. Not the kind that unnerves you, but the kind that tells you the fight is over. The kind that feels earned. I wasn't there yet. Not after the call from Officer Ward. Not after learning Dennis had dragged my name into his mess. Not after hearing he was out, free on bail, limping around again like nothing ever stuck to him for long. But I had a plan. Not the kind built on violence or rage. I'd learned my lesson. Pain leaves scars, sure, but wisdom leaves blueprints. I just had to follow the ones I'd been sketching in my mind for months. It started with a man named Carter Lewis, an old friend from high school who now worked IT security at a bank. We weren't close, but we'd stayed in touch over the years. I'd helped him replace a water heater once, and in return, he owed me a favor. "Dennis Rayburn?" Carter asked over a beer on my deck. "Yeah, I can dig into his accounts." "But, why?" "Let's just say I need to shine a little light on a cockroach," I said. He grinned. "You always did have a poetic streak." A week later, Carter called me back. "Your guy's been busy. Tried to open a line of credit under a fake name. Flagged it. He's been dipping into small-time scams, maybe working with someone else. Does the name Sarah ring a bell in anything he's doing?" I asked. Pause. "Yeah," Carter said. "Looks like he wired $2,000 to a Sarah L. from a burner account. Last week." I sat back in the chair, staring up at the pine tree overhead. So she was still tied to him. Even after everything. That hurt more than I expected. I knew what I had to do next. I went down to the sheriff's department again, this time with everything Carter had compiled. Dates, bank accounts, flagged transactions. I told Officer Ward the truth, how Dennis and my wife had lied, cheated, and nearly ruined me. How he was still out there, trying to stir up more trouble. She took the folder, flipped through it slowly. "You really did your homework," she said. This could help a lot. I nodded. He wanted to pull me back into the mud. I'd rather drown him in his own. She looked at me for a long moment before saying, "You know, a lot of men in your shoes would have tried to solve this with fists or worse." "I already took that beating," I said. This time, I wanted to stick. The next time I heard Dennis's name, it was on the news. Local man arrested for fraud and identity theft. Previously on probation. Facing federal charges. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I just stood in my living room, arms folded, tank lying at my feet like always. That was it. No fanfare. No fireworks. Just justice. Sarah didn't reach out after that. I think she knew the bridge was burned beyond repair. Maybe she got scared. Maybe she realized Dennis was never the man she thought he was. Or maybe, just maybe, she finally understood what she'd thrown away. I'll never know. And I'm okay with that. The weeks passed. Then months. Greg and I built a shed together. Tank started sleeping a little longer in the mornings. The town fair rolled in and out without me noticing much. Life had slipped back into something steady. Real. I found myself smiling more. Not big, fake grins, but soft, natural ones. The kind that come when you catch yourself remembering you survived the worst of it and still came out whole. One night, I poured a glass of whiskey and sat on the deck. I watched the wind move through the trees. I looked at the stars like old friends. I lifted my glass. To lies exposed. To shadows cleared. And to peace, finally, fully mine. You know, they say revenge never gives you closure. But I disagree. It doesn't always come with flames or fury. Sometimes, it comes with the silence after a storm. The sound of your own breath, steady in your chest. And the weight of nothing left to carry.